Rose is not really the name of one flower. It's the name of an entire genus, Rosa, made up of roughly 200 wild species scattered across the temperate regions of the Northern Hemisphere, from Europe and North Africa through Asia and into North America. Thousands of garden varieties have been bred from them. So when someone said a rose, they could be picturing almost anything from a wild five-petaled shrub growing along a hedgerow to a tightly layered hybrid sold at a flower shop. To tell this story properly, we need one specific plant to follow. So this episode focuses on Rosa Gallica, the Gallic rose, one of the oldest roses in continuous human cultivation, and the ancestor of an entire branch of the rose family tree that people have been growing for at least 2,000 years. If you enjoy discovering the science, history, and culture hidden behind the world's flowers, subscribe to the Flower Encyclopedia. Every episode follows one species from its biology to its place in human history, and there's a great deal more to say about this one. Rosa Gallica is native to a band of territories stretching from the Mediterranean through Central and Eastern Europe and into the Caucasus. In the wild, it isn't the plant most people imagine when they hear the word rose. It's a low, suckering shrub, spreading into thickets rather than standing as a single tall bush, with slender prickly stems and simple, deep pink to purplish-red flowers, usually with just 5 petals arranged around a bright crown of yellow stamens. The name Gallica comes from Gaul, the old name for the region that includes modern France, where the species has grown wild for a very long time. But its story doesn't stay confined to one country. Historical and horticultural sources describe Rosa Gallica being cultivated by ancient Mediterranean civilizations long before it became closely associated with medieval Europe. It's a plant that seems to have followed human settlement almost everywhere it could survive. That relationship deepened enormously during the Middle Ages, particularly around the French town of Provins, southeast of Paris. According to organizations dedicated to historic roses, Provins became a center for growing a particular semi-double form of Rosa Gallica, cultivated commercially for medicine, perfume, and dyes from at least the 13th century onward. This form became known by a very specific name, Rosa Gallica var. Officinalis, the word officinalis, essentially meaning of the apothecary shop. Its common English name reflects that directly, the apothecary's rose. For centuries, dried petals from this rose were an actual pharmacy item. They were made into syrups, conserves, and rose water, produced through steam distillation of the petals, and used by monks, physicians, and apothecaries to treat a wide range of complaints. It's important to be careful here, because a long tradition of use is not the same thing as modern proof of medical effectiveness. What we can say with confidence is that this rose held real economic and medical importance in European history, whether or not every specific remedy would hold up under a modern clinical trial. The apothecary's rose carries another layer of history as well. Its deep red color made it a recognizable emblem and became closely tied to the House of Lancaster during the 15th century conflict in England known as the Wars of the Roses. The red rose set against the white rose of the rival House of York. A single flowering shrub, spreading quietly through gardens and monastery grounds, had somehow become entangled with a national political struggle, and its genetic influence didn't stop there. Rosa Gallica is considered one of the founding species behind the Gallica roses, an entire historic class of old garden roses that, by the early 19th century, included well over 1,000 named varieties, prized for their rich crimson and purple tones, colors that were largely missing from other European wild roses. One of the most famous, Rosa Mundi, is a striped pink and white spore of the apothecary's rose that has been cultivated since at least the 1540s, and carries its own origin legend involving Henry II of England and his mistress Rosamund. Though like many rose legends, that particular story is folklore rather than documented fact. Some researchers also connect Rosa Gallica to the ancestry of the damask rose, one of the most fragrant and historically significant rose groups ever developed, believed to descend in part from a cross involving Rosa Gallica and another wild species, Rosa muscata. So when you look at almost any old, richly colored, intensely fragrant garden rose today, there's a reasonable chance that Rosa Gallica sits somewhere in its ancestry. But behind all of that human history is a plant that still has to solve the same biological problem every flowering species faces: how to reproduce. This is where Rosa Gallica and wild roses in general reveal something genuinely surprising. Despite their fragrance and their reputation as classic garden flowers, roses don't produce nectar. None of it. The reward they offer insects is pollen, and pollen alone. Bees are the main visitors, and many of them, especially bumblebees, use a technique called buzz pollination, rather than simply landing and collecting pollen passively. The bee grips the ring of stamens at the center of the flower and vibrates its flight muscles at high speed. That vibration shakes pollen loose in the anthers, and some of it clings to the bee's body, ready to be carried to the next flower it visits. This is one of the reasons the shape of the flower matters so much. Botanists at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, have pointed out that open, simple flowers, the kind found in wild roses like Rosa Gallica, with a single ring of 5 petals, expose their pollen-bearing stamens directly. Bees can access that pollen easily. Many modern ornamental roses, bred over generations for dense, heavily layered petals, essentially bury their own reproductive structures under extra flower tissue. The result is a rose that can look extraordinary to a human eye while offering almost nothing useful to a bee. Wild species roses, including Rosa Gallica, are exactly the opposite. Structurally simple, but genuinely valuable to pollinating insects. Bees aren't the only visitors, either. The same open, flattened flower shape that makes pollen accessible to bumblebees also draws in hoverflies, soldier beetles, and other pollen-feeding beetles, all of which move between flowers while feeding and inadvertently carry pollen along with them. Some observers of Gallica roses specifically describe them becoming genuine hubs of insect activity through the mid-morning hours, visited by a broader range of species than many modern double-flowered roses ever attract. And the relationship goes beyond pollination alone. In parts of Asia, researchers studying wild and semi-wild roses have documented leafcutter bees using rose leaves specifically to build their nest cells, cutting characteristic notches from the foliage to construct brood chambers, meaning a rose shrub can support pollinator populations in more than one way at once, offering both pollen and raw nesting material. If pollination succeeds, the flower's job is essentially finished, and the plant moves on to its next stage. The petals fall away, and the base of the flower begins to swell into a fruit known as a rose hip. Rose hips are far more than a decorative afterthought. They're an important food source for wildlife, particularly heading into autumn and winter. Birds such as thrushes and finches, along with small mammals, feed on the fleshy outer layer of the hip, and in the process they disperse the seeds inside, sometimes swallowing them whole and depositing them elsewhere, sometimes pecking them out directly. It's a simple but effective partnership. The plant gets its seeds carried away from the parent shrub, and the animal gets a source of nutrition, including a notably high concentration of vitamin C, at a time of year when food can be scarce. Humans have taken advantage of that same nutritional value. Rose hips have a long culinary and folk medicine history across Europe, used in syrups, jams, teas, and jellies. Their vitamin C content became particularly well known during the 20th century, when wartime shortages of imported citrus fruit in Britain led to organized campaigns to gather wild rose hips and process them into syrup as a nutritional supplement. It's a good example of how a plant's ordinary biological strategy, packaging seeds inside a nutrient-rich fruit to attract animals, ended up intersecting directly with human history at a moment of real need. Growing Rosa Gallica today is relatively straightforward, which is part of why it has persisted in cultivation for so long. It tolerates a wide range of soils, doesn't demand constant attention, and spreads readily through suckering, sending up new shoots from its root system to form dense colonies over time. Unlike many modern roses, which were bred using repeat flowering species introduced from China in the 18th and 19th centuries, Rosa Gallica typically flowers just once a year, in early summer, producing a relatively short but intense flowering season rather than a long succession of blooms. Its conservation situation is a little more complicated than a simple label. Rosa Gallica has not been given a formal global assessment on the IUCN Red List, so it isn't officially classified as threatened or of least concern at a worldwide level. But that doesn't mean everything is fine everywhere. In parts of its native range, including regions of France, botanists have documented declining wild populations, driven largely by urbanization, changes in agricultural land use, and the loss of the hedgerows and semi-natural habitats the species depends on. Some conservation organizations have specifically prioritized preserving its genetic diversity in the wild, separate from the thousands of cultivated varieties that already exist in gardens. That distinction matters. The Gallica roses growing in heritage gardens around the world are not really a substitute for the wild populations that gave rise to them in the first place. Cultivated roses preserve a narrow slice of the species' genetic diversity, the traits people found desirable. Wild Rosa Gallica, scattered through hedgerows and open woodland edges across its natural range, still carries the fuller genetic story of the species, shaped by centuries of adaptation rather than centuries of selection by gardeners. There's something worth sitting within that. The rose is probably the most symbolically loaded flower in Western culture, a stand-in for love, politics, perfume, poetry, nearly anything a person wants a flower to represent. But underneath all of that meaning is an actual wild shrub with a real native range, real pollinators it depends on, real fruit that real animals rely on for food, and a real population that can decline like any other plant if its habitat disappears. Rosa Gallica has been a garden plant, a medicine, a political emblem, and the ancestor of countless roses that never grew wild anywhere. But it started and still exists as an ordinary flowering shrub trying to get pollinated by a bumblebee and get its seeds eaten by a bird. Everything else, the apothecaries, the crusaders, the warring houses of England, the perfume trade, was built on top of that much simpler story. Thank you for watching this episode of the Flower Encyclopedia.